He was just a quiet single dad driving his daughter home until flashing lights turned a peaceful night into a confrontation with power. The officer thought he had authority, but what he didn't know was the man he pulled over once led missions the government still denies. No weapons, no anger, just silence, strength, and a little girl who whispered the truth that shook a courtroom. This is the story of what happens when quiet honor meets unchecked ego, and how one father's calm fight changed everything. The headlights of Logan Miller's old Chevy Silverado cut through the foggy back road like a soft whisper, not a roar. The Ohio night was quiet, too quiet. Pine trees lined both sides of the road like silent sentries. The rhythmic hum of the tires on pavement was all that filled the air until a tiny voice broke the silence. "Daddy, is Grandma gonna be okay?" Logan glanced at the rearview mirror. In the back seat, his 9-year-old daughter Bella clutched a worn teddy bear, her eyes wide but brave. "She's strong," Logan said softly, "just like someone else I know." Bella offered a small smile and rested her cheek against the window. Logan could still feel the scent of hospital antiseptic clinging to his jacket. They had just spent 5 hours at the VA hospital. His mother's health had been declining for months, and he'd been putting off this visit for too long. Duty used to be simple, clear orders, black and white. But fatherhood, that was a different battlefield. He reached over and turned down the radio. Country static faded. Logan preferred silence anyway. Words were tools, not toys. And in his world, silence had always meant control, observation, survival. As they rounded a bend in the road, blue and red lights exploded into the night. Logan's eyes narrowed. A patrol cruiser blocked half the lane. The spotlight hit his windshield like a sudden interrogation. "Hold tight," he said calmly to Bella, who straightened in her seat. A loudspeaker crackled. "Driver, turn off the engine and step out of the vehicle slowly." Logan frowned. No rolling stop, no speeding, no busted tail light. He'd checked everything before leaving the hospital lot. This wasn't standard. He shifted into park, killed the engine, and kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. Behind him, Bella whispered, "Did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," he said. "Stay buckled. No matter what, you stay in the truck." The door creaked as he stepped out, the cold October wind cutting through his faded green military jacket, the same one he'd worn home after his final deployment. From the patrol car emerged a man in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, and carrying himself like a man who believed the law belonged to him personally. His badge gleamed under the spotlight. "We're going to Bryce Mercer," he announced. "License and registration." Logan nodded. "It's in the glove box. May I reach for it?" Mercer narrowed his eyes. "You got attitude, sir?" "No, sir," Logan replied evenly. "Just making sure I follow proper protocol." Mercer motioned irritably. "Fine, do it. Slow." Logan leaned in through the window, mindful of every movement. Bella's eyes locked with his, trembling but silent. He handed over his license and registration. Mercer studied it for a beat, then scoffed. Logan Miller. Occupation: janitor. He raised a brow. "Out late with your kid, huh?" "We're coming from the hospital," Logan said. "VA." Mercer circled the truck slowly, eyes scanning like he was sniffing out trouble where none existed. "You a vet or something?" "Yes, huh." "Well, I served too," Mercer muttered. "But I don't expect special treatment." "I didn't ask for any," Logan replied, his tone flat. Mercer walked back toward the cruiser, muttering something into his radio. Logan's gut twisted, not in fear, but in memory. He'd stood face to face with warlords who carried less arrogance than this man. After a few minutes, Mercer returned holding a yellow slip. "Failure to maintain lane," he said. Also, tail light flickered for a second. Logan raised a brow. I've maintained the vehicle. That taillight's solid. You calling me a liar? I'm saying the facts don't match, Logan said evenly. There's a difference. Mercer took a step closer, voice low. I don't care what difference you think exists. You people come through here thinking you're invisible. Logan's eyes shifted. You people. Mercer hesitated just for a second. Veterans, drifters, janitors playing hero. Look, just sign the ticket and go home. Logan didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his pocket and slowly pulled out his phone. He hit record, held it at chest level. A soft red light blinked. You recording me? Mercer barked. I'm protecting myself, Logan said calmly. It's my right. Mercer's face twisted with something darker. You're not in Iraq anymore, soldier. This is my town. Logan met his gaze. Then act like it's your home. Not your kingdom. Behind him, Bella's tiny voice floated out from the truck. Daddy, are we in trouble? The moment shattered something in the air. For a heartbeat, Mercer looked like he realized what stood in front of him. Not a criminal. Not a threat, just a father. A tired man with hollow eyes, and a little girl too wise for her years. But arrogance dies slow. Sign the ticket, Mercer growled. Or I'll add obstruction. Logan signed, not because he accepted it, but because he chose his battles. And this wasn't going to end here. He folded the paper, helped Bella buckle tighter, and drove away into the darkness without another word. But in his mind, something shifted. He had stayed silent too long, for his daughter's sake, for others, like him this time. Maybe silence wasn't enough. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and blueberry jam. Logan stood barefoot in his faded jeans, slowly buttering bread with one hand, while his other adjusted the old radio dial on the counter. Static hissed before settling into a quiet country station. Bella sat at the tiny oak table swinging her legs. She scribbled on a napkin with a pink marker. At the top, in careful letters, she had written, "Things Daddy shouldn't have to deal with." Number 1 read mean policeman with shiny head. Logan glanced over his lips, tugging into something between a smile and a sigh. That list getting long. She looked up with serious eyes. Only 3 things so far. Number 2 is hospital smells. Number 3 is burnt toast. I'll work on the toast, he murmured. But inside he was still processing the night before. Not the insult. Not even the unjust ticket. It was Bella's voice, so soft, saying, "Are we in trouble?" That stuck. That lodged deep. After dropping Bella off at school, where her teacher waved warmly, and Bella ran off without looking back, Logan didn't drive home. Instead, he turned toward the town square. The courthouse sat there like a slumbering beast. Brick walls, stone pillars, flags fluttering under the morning sun. He parked 2 blocks away and walked. The town was small enough that everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. And yet no one really knew Logan. He preferred it that way. Better to be underestimated than misunderstood. Inside the courthouse annex, he scanned the directory and took the stairs to the 3rd floor. A brass plaque read, "Brooks and Palmer Civil Rights and Veteran Advocacy." He knocked. "Come in," a voice called. The office was small but organized paper stacks held down by ceramic mugs, framed military medals next to law school diplomas. Behind the desk sat a black woman in her early 40s. Sleeves rolled up, typing fiercely before she even looked up. When she did, her eyes widened. "Logan." "Hey, Linda." "Logan." "Freaking Miller," she said, standing. "I thought you vanished to the hills with nothing but a toolbox and a ghost story." "Almost true," he replied with a faint smirk. She walked over and hugged him, quick, firm, familiar. "You look older. And tired. But still annoyingly noble. Hospital visit last night. Then a run-in with a cop who thinks the Constitution is a buffet. Her smile faded. Sit. Talk. He recounted everything, the stop, the tone, the vague charges, and Bella's fear. He showed her the video he recorded. She watched it in silence, arms crossed, her eyes unreadable. When it ended, she exhaled. He hovered near his holster. Did you notice that? I noticed, Logan said. Bella noticed too. Linda shook her head. This isn't just a bad ticket. This is intimidation, abuse of discretion, possibly more. I don't want a war, Linda, he said quietly, but I also don't want Bella growing up thinking you let things slide because you're tired. You came to the right place. I didn't come for me. I know. She clicked open a folder and began typing. We'll file a civil suit. Civil rights violation targeting a veteran, emotional trauma for a minor. And we'll request the footage from his cruiser. Yours is good, but if his dash cam shows half of what yours does, he's cooked. Logan nodded slowly. He doesn't know who I am. I didn't tell him. Just my name. Linda's typing stopped. She looked at him. Did you think that was an accident? You've spent years making yourself invisible. You built walls around your past, like they were sacred. They were, he said. But that little girl of yours, she deserves better than silence. Logan looked down at his hands. Rough knuckles, faint burn scars, proof of work and war. I used to believe doing the right thing meant staying quiet, he muttered. But now I wonder if maybe saying something is the right thing. Linda's voice softened. It can be, and this time it needs to be. A knock on the office door broke the moment. A younger man peeked in. Mail drop, Ms. Brooks. Thanks, Ben. When the door shut again, Logan stood. I'm not asking for revenge, he said. I just want him to know there's a line. And he crossed it. Linda stood too. Then let's draw that line with ink and fire. As he left her office, Logan felt something shift in his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was resolve. Later that afternoon, Sergeant Bryce Mercer sat at his desk at the precinct, half listening to a traffic scanner while sipping gas station coffee. His boots rested on the desk. He scrolled through headlines, half bored. A manila envelope dropped in front of him with a thud. He looked up. What's this? He asked the clerk. Certified. Lawsuit notice, the clerk said. From a Logan Miller. Mercer chuckled. The janitor. He flipped open the envelope lazily until his eyes hit the bolded words, Violation of Federal Civil Rights Statute, U.S. Code 42, Section 1983, and beneath that, filed by Logan Miller, decorated U.S. Marine and father to a minor child, present during unlawful stop. Mercer's smirk vanished. The name burned suddenly, Logan Miller. He couldn't place it, but it stirred something. Distant. Unsettling. He dropped the papers on his desk. Outside the window, clouds began to gather. The day had started sunny. But now it felt like a storm was coming. Rain tapped gently against the front porch as Logan sat on the wooden steps, a thermos of black coffee balanced between his palms. He wore the same faded green military jacket he'd had for years. The patches were gone, the medals long boxed away. But the weight of service still lingered in the way he sat, shoulders square, spine straight, eyes always scanning the horizon. Inside, Bella's laughter rang out as she practiced piano from a YouTube tutorial. She wasn't good yet, but she was trying. Logan smiled faintly. There was something beautiful about the way children tried. No ego, just heart. He took a slow sip of coffee. A crow landed on the mailbox and let out a sharp caw. Storm's coming, Logan thought. He'd faced worse storms. Most didn't carry thunder, they wore camouflage or suits and called it order. But storms were storms. And this one had his name on it. His phone buzzed beside him. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Logan Miller. A beat of silence. Then a voice, low and smooth. Mr. Miller, this is Captain Daniels from the State Patrol Internal Review Board. We've received notice of a pending civil suit regarding Sergeant Bryce Mercer. Logan said nothing. I'd like to ask you a few preliminary questions off the record. Still silence. Mr. Miller. Logan's voice, when it came, was calm but firm. Is my silence bothering you? Captain Daniels cleared his throat. Well, it's unexpected. Logan let the pause linger. Then maybe you should ask why a Marine who spent most of his life cleaning up other people's messes finally decided to speak. Click. He ended the call. Logan didn't do interviews, didn't do headlines. He believed the loudest man in the room was usually the weakest. But this wasn't about volume. This was about Bella, about the kind of world he wanted her to believe in. He rose slowly, joints cracking like old floorboards. Inside, Bella turned and grinned. Daddy, I learned 3 chords. That's 3 more than I ever did, he said. Can I play them at court? Logan blinked. At court? You said we're going to court, right? Like on TV. He sat beside her. We are. But it's not like TV. There won't be any music, just people trying to figure out what's right. Bella tilted her head. And you'll tell them what happened. Logan hesitated. I won't have to. The truth will. But what if they don't believe it? He looked into her eyes, so full of fire, so full of faith. Then we show them who we are, he said. And we let that speak louder. She thought for a moment. You're not mad at the policeman. Logan took a breath. I'm not mad. I'm tired. Tired of seeing men wear a badge but forget the weight of what it means. Bella nodded slowly, then leaned her head on his shoulder. I think you're the bravest, Daddy. He didn't reply. He just held her. That night, Logan opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a sealed folder marked Confidential, Operation Quiet Echo. He flipped through it slowly. Old citations, commendations, a photograph of him and his unit in desert fatigues. At the bottom, a laminated ID badge, Logan J. Miller, Shadow Echo Unit. Most people had never heard of Shadow Echo. It was a quiet name for a quiet force, tasked with things the public would never read about and politicians would never admit. He had walked into villages no satellite had mapped, pulled men from flames, dragged bodies across minefields, neutralized threats before the threats had a chance to breathe. He was not proud of it, but he had never once been ashamed, and that mattered now. He picked up the badge and stared at it, remembering the night in Kandahar when his silence had saved 6 men from an ambush. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't fired. He had simply moved, calculated, precise, effective. He had always believed in silence, but now, silence felt like surrender. Across town, Sergeant Bryce Mercer sat in his truck, parked in the shadows near the courthouse. His jaw clenched as he stared at the letter again. Logan Miller. The name crawled beneath his skin now. He'd asked around. One of the rookies at the station had gone pale when he mentioned the name. You mean Shadow Echo Mercer had barked a laugh. That's just folklore. The rookie shook his head. No, sir. He's real. My uncle served with him in Syria. Said Logan pulled an entire fire team out of an ambush with nothing but a broken radio and a knife. Mercer had waved it off, but the seed was planted. Now he scrolled through his tablet, reading news articles, old headlines, about Marines given medals under seal. No pictures, no details, just quiet footnotes. And then he saw it, an anonymous quote from a retired colonel. He was the man you never saw coming. The kind who walked in alone and made a whole village safer. We called him the ghost of Kandahar. Mercer's face turned pale. He wasn't just a janitor. He was that janitor. He slammed the tablet shut. For the first time in years, Bryce Mercer felt something that his badge, his gun, and his swagger had shielded him from. He felt small. The rain hadn't let up since dawn. Thin rivulets crawled down the windows of the station house, casting warped shadows across the linoleum floor. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, tired, overworked, much like the men beneath them. Sergeant Bryce Mercer walked into the break room, his boots leaving muddy tracks behind him. A styrofoam cup hissed under the coffee machine as he stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight. His usual swagger had dulled his eyes, scanning, calculating. He could feel it. Not the lawsuit, not the badge pressure. The whispers. 2 rookies sat at the end of the break room table pretending to scroll their phones, but Mercer knew. He saw the subtle glances, the way their posture stiffened when he entered. He'd seen that look before years ago in the academy, when a cadet got caught cheating. He sipped the bitter coffee and turned. "You got something to say?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made both rookies straighten. No, sir," one stammered. The other tried to play casual. "Just reading some stuff." Mercer stepped closer. "What stuff?" The younger one swallowed. Just a thread on VetNet. There's been a lot of posts about the Miller case." Mercer narrowed his eyes. "Miller, as in Logan Miller." The first rookie nodded cautiously. "Yes, sir. Apparently, he's kind of a big deal. I didn't know when you pulled him over." "No offense, but kind of a big deal." Mercer snapped. "He's a janitor with a chip on his shoulder." The rookie shook his head. "No, sir. He's Shadow Echo." The name hit like a thunderclap. Mercer forced a scoff, but it was hollow. "You kids, and your ghost stories." "It's not a story," the second rookie said. "My cousin served in Operation Talon Edge Special Recon. He told me about a guy they called the Wall Walker. Never lost a man. Never raised his voice. They said when he stood still, even the dirt held its breath." Mercer clenched his jaw. "Let me guess. That was Logan, too." The rookie nodded. They never confirmed names officially. But same time frame, same unit, same silence. Mercer turned away, the coffee cup now cold in his hand. In the hallway, Detective Maria Lang approached, arms full of folders. She glanced at Mercer, then at the break room. "You lit a fuse you can't put out," she said quietly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mercer replied. "You think no one's watching, but they are. And not just the precinct. People talk Bryce, veterans forums, military chat boards. One of them said, and I quote, 'If they're going after Miller, we stand with him.'" Mercer waved her off. He's playing the sympathy card. Lang shook her head. "No, he's not playing at all. That's what makes this different. He hasn't said a single word publicly, and somehow that's louder than anything you've shouted since you got that badge." Mercer stormed down the hallway, tossing the cup in the trash with a sharp clang. 2 towns over, in a small garage that smelled of oil and honor, Matthew Reed was under a pickup truck grease up to his elbows. A scar down his left arm, earned in a firefight outside Cobble, burned with the cold. His phone buzzed on the workbench. He pulled himself out, wiped his hands on a rag, and glanced at the screen. Logan Miller. Matthew froze for a second. He hadn't heard from Logan in years. The last time was a 3-sentence email that ended with, "Tell no one where I am. Just live well." He picked up. "Logan, hey Matt." A beat of silence passed between 2 men who had walked through fire together. "You okay?" Reed asked. "I've been better." I read the thread. "VetNet's blowing up. Some of the guys are talking about driving out." "No," Logan said quickly. "I don't want this turning into a spectacle." "I get it," Reed said. "But we owe you. You owe me nothing. I did my job. You walked out alive. That was enough." Reed sighed. "Then let me do mine now, if you need a character witness." There was a pause. Logan's voice was quieter now. "I might." "Then I'll be there," Reed said. "Even ghosts deserve to be seen once in a while." That evening, in the quiet of his living room, Logan watched Bella sleep on the couch, curled under an old Marine Corps blanket. She'd fallen asleep, waiting for a Disney movie to load on the ancient DVD player. Her breath rose and fell gently, as steady as ocean waves. Logan sat on the floor beside her, a legal pad in hand. He'd started making a list, not of complaints, not of grievances, but of reasons. Why I'm doing this. Bella deserves to feel safe when she sees red and blue lights. Veterans deserve dignity after service, not suspicion. Silence should not mean submission, because I was trained to protect the innocent. Because my father stayed silent his whole life, and it never changed a thing. He paused, tapping the pen against the paper. Then he wrote, because maybe the world needs to remember what quiet strength looks like. The phone sat on the counter, like a sleeping dog, silent, patient, dangerous only when stirred. Logan stood over it, one hand on the sink, the other resting on the edge of the kitchen table, where Bella's crayons lay scattered from her latest masterpiece, a stick figure version of him, holding a justice shield in one hand, and her hand in the other. He stared at the screen for a long time before tapping the contact. Linda Brooks. The name blinked for a moment, then began to ring. It had been nearly 7 years since they last spoke. The last time was on a battlefield far from home, when blood dust and desperation bound people tighter than family ties. Brooks, a sharp voice answered. Logan didn't speak right away. The silence was enough. The voice softened instantly. Logan. Hey, Doc. There was a pause, followed by the rustle of movement. You calling me out of the blue usually means one of two things. Either someone's bleeding, or someone's dying. Logan exhaled. Neither. Not yet. She didn't laugh. She knew his voice too well to mistake his calm for comfort. I need your help. Where are you? Out near Fairfield. A cop named Bryce Mercer pulled me over. Didn't recognize the name, didn't care. I had Bella with me. It wasn't just a stop, Linda. It was something else. Linda Brooks leaned back in her chair, barefoot in her home office, war medals glinting behind her, on a shelf no client ever saw. She stared at the ceiling. Tell me everything. He did. Every detail. The spotlight. The hovering hand near the holster. Bella's voice trembling in the dark. When he finished, there was only silence on the line. Logan. We've both seen what power looks like when it loses its anchor, she said finally. You think this man is bad policy in uniform? No, Logan said. I think he's a man who never got taught what it meant to carry weight. And now he throws it wherever he pleases. And you want to go public. I want to go through the system. You think the system will protect you? No, Logan replied. But I need Bella to see that I tried. Linda closed her eyes. Okay, here's what we'll do. Civil rights case, federal jurisdiction. We bring it clean. I don't want social media noise. Not yet. We'll let the facts bleed first, quietly. They always leave a stain. Logan let a small smile creep across his face. You haven't changed a bit. I've changed, Linda said softly. I just changed where I aim the fire. At the other end of town, Bryce Mercer sat in his garage, sipping from a beer bottle and scrolling through his phone. The more he searched, the deeper the hole seemed to get. There were no photos, no official bios, but the name Logan Miller kept surfacing in whispers on message boards, old forums, declassified scraps of military chatter. Shadow Echo, Operation Night Watch, Ghost of Fallujah. He slammed the bottle down on the workbench glass, chipping slightly. This couldn't be real. He was Sergeant Bryce Mercer, 15 years on the force. Medals, commendations, community awards. He'd even been invited to speak at the local high school. And now this ghost from nowhere was unraveling it all. He opened a file on his laptop labeled Body Cam. Watched the footage again. He hated watching himself. There he was, hovering too close, voice too sharp, hand twitching near his hip, the little girl's voice echoing. Daddy, Are we in trouble? Even without sound, the look on her face told the whole story. He paused it, stared at the freeze frame, then closed the laptop. He wasn't the villain. He was a cop. He was the system. And that system was cracking. The next morning, Linda Brooks arrived at Logan's modest cabin in a dusty blue sedan briefcase, in hand curls tied back and fire in her stride. Bella greeted her with wide eyes. "Are you the lawyer lady?" Linda smiled. "Guilty. You look like you could beat someone up without using words," Bella observed. "I try." Inside, Logan poured coffee into mismatched mugs. "Still take it black. Do you even need to ask?" They sat at the table while Bella played in the next room. "You still carry the weight like armor," Linda said, tapping the table gently. But this time, Logan, "You don't have to go it alone." He looked up. "That's the part I don't know how to do." "Well," she said, pulling out a folder. "Good thing I do." They reviewed the strategy, paperwork, legal channels, statutes, the Freedom of Information Act request for Mercer's dash cam footage, the list of prior complaints against him that had been buried. It was more than a case now. It was a reckoning. Before leaving, Linda stood in the doorway looking at Logan. Why now, she asked. Why break the silence after all these years? Logan looked toward the living room where Bella sat drawing in her notebook. Because the world she grows up in will be shaped by what I do now. Linda nodded. Then let's shape it right. Sergeant Bryce Mercer wasn't in the mood for paperwork. The fluorescent lights in his office were buzzing again, giving him a low-grade headache that pulsed right behind his eyes. The coffee was burnt, the printer jammed for the third time that morning, and the air conditioner clicked on and off like it couldn't decide whether to function or give up entirely. But the worst part wasn't mechanical. It was silent. People weren't talking to him the same way. The front desk clerk had barely nodded. 2 detectives had passed him in the hallway and didn't offer the usual half smirk or shoulder clap. It was subtle, but Mercer had been in this game long enough to know what a shift in current felt like. He was no longer the center of confidence. He was now a subject of caution. His email chimed, a single message from the station's legal liaison. Certified mail has arrived for you, hand-delivered from the Civil Division. Please sign and collect. Mercer frowned. What now? He rose, straightened his uniform shirt, and walked down the corridor. His boots echoed off the tile louder than usual, like the hallway was watching. The receptionist handed him a large manila envelope and a clipboard. Signature here, she said, flatly, not making eye contact. He signed, took the envelope, and returned to his office. He stared at it for a long moment, his name printed cleanly on the front. No markings, no return address, just the seal of the State Court of Franklin County and a tracking number. He tore it open. Inside was a single legal packet. On the first page in bold letters, notice of civil complaint filed against Sergeant Bryce Mercer, plaintiff, Logan Miller, allegations, unlawful detention, violation of civil rights, abuse of authority. Emotional distress of minor child Mercer blinked. Underneath the charges, a line in italics. The plaintiff is a decorated U.S. Marine veteran and primary caregiver to a minor. Incident captured on personal and public recording. His eyes narrowed at the next line. Represented by Linda Brooks, a scorned former military medical officer, JAG Division. Mercer pushed back from his desk. Linda Brooks, he muttered. That name rang a bell. A big one. He opened his laptop, clicked into the legal search database, and typed quickly. Within seconds, a profile popped up. Linda Brooks, civil rights attorney, decorated for field service in Kandahar, earned 3 veterans' rights victories in state and federal court, known for her courtroom presence biting logic and her connection to high-level operatives in the U.S. military. Mercer's mouth went dry. He sat there staring at the screen as the silence in the office grew heavier around him. He picked a fight with the wrong man, Across town, Logan was kneeling in the garden, turning the soil with a rusted spade. Bella was nearby, barefoot in the soft grass, reading a library book about famous American court cases. She read out loud without noticing. Brown versus Board of Education. Landmark decision. Changed history forever, she announced. Logan wiped his brow and looked up. You studying to be my lawyer now? I'm practicing, she said. Miss Carter says I have a good voice for truth. He smiled quietly through him. A car pulled into the gravel driveway. Linda stepped out, her coat flapping slightly in the breeze, a folder tucked under her arm. Logan stood brushing dirt from his knees. I take it he received the envelope? She nodded. Signed for it himself. Probably turned 3 shades paler. Logan didn't respond, just nodded once. Response is due in 10 business days, Linda continued. After that, we proceed with court scheduling. It's moving faster than expected. Your name carries weight. I never wanted it. To Logan muttered. Want it or not, it does. And now finally it's being used for the right thing. Bella came running up, her book in hand. Ms. Linda, did you know my dad can throw a knife into a tree trunk from 20 feet? Linda raised an eyebrow. Is that so? He showed me last year. Said it was to teach me focus. But I think he's just cool. Logan smiled sheepishly. We all have our tricks. Well, Linda said, let's put yours to use in a courtroom. They stepped onto the porch. Linda opened her folder, revealing a series of photos stills from the body cam footage, time-stamped and enhanced. Bella's small face wide-eyed. Mercer's looming posture. Logan's steady frame. Everything's admissible. And the judge assigned to this case, Cynthia Morales. Fair. No nonsense. She'll see through Mercer's act in 10 seconds, flat. Logan studied the photos for a long moment, then set them down. I don't want this to turn into a war. Linda met his gaze. It already is. But you're not the aggressor. You're the reminder that quiet doesn't mean weak, and mercy doesn't mean surrender. He nodded slowly. Then we do this, he said. Not for vengeance, for the next father who won't have the words or the camera. Linda closed the folder, and we make sure the whole courtroom hears Bella's voice. They both turned as she stepped back inside her little voice, echoing, Daddy? I hope the judge has a kind face. Logan smiled faintly. She'll have a just one. That's what matters. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood floor polish and time. Its high ceiling and arched windows lent it a kind of quiet gravitas, as if justice itself lived here, and had done so long before the people inside ever arrived. Rows of pew-like benches filled slowly with curious locals, reporters from regional outlets, and a few veterans in worn jackets, sitting stiff-backed like they were on formation again. They didn't speak much, but their presence said enough. At the front sat Judge Cynthia Morales, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and known for silencing nonsense with a glance. Her robe draped over her frame like a coat of steel. Her gavel had only been struck 3 times that month, but each time it had meant something. She flipped through the preliminary docket with swift, practiced fingers. Then she looked up. Case number 21172 CV, the bailiff announced. Logan Miller versus Sergeant Bryce Mercer. Allegations, civil rights violations, unlawful detainment, psychological distress of a minor. A hush fell over the room as the heavy doors at the back creaked open. Sergeant Bryce Mercer walked in. Shoulders squared, lips pursed in a defiant line. He wore his dress blues, hoping the medals on his chest might weigh more than the facts against him. He nodded curtly to his attorney, a young man in an ill-fitting suit, who looked like he belonged more at a desk job than a legal battle. They took their seats at the defense table. Moments later, the door opened again. Logan Miller stepped inside. No uniform, no medals, No ceremony, just the quiet dignity of a man who had seen war and chose peace. He wore a simple navy button-down shirt tucked into khakis, his green marine jacket folded over one arm. He held Bella's hand in the other. Her little feet padded softly against the tile as they walked. She wore a pale blue dress with white lace at the collar, her serious dress she had told him that morning. Her hair was pulled back in a ribbon, and her eyes scanned the room curiously bravely. Logan nodded to the bailiff, then to Judge Morales. The moment he entered, a ripple passed through the crowd. Several veterans rose quietly in respect. No command, no signal, just instinct. Judge Morales' eyes caught the motion. She studied Logan for a moment longer than most, then nodded, once subtle, almost imperceptible. "Ms. Brooks," the judge said, "you may proceed." Linda Brooks stood with calm precision, her charcoal gray suit fit like armor. She walked to the center of the room, her voice controlled and deliberate. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Logan Miller, is not here today for vengeance. He does not seek to vilify law enforcement. He served this country under the same principles this courtroom was built upon: duty, restraint, and honor." She paused, locking eyes with the jury. But what happened on that roadside was not honorable. It was not lawful. And most painfully, it was witnessed by a child. His child. A moment that should never have happened, and yet did, because a man in uniform forgot the weight of the badge he wore. There was no dramatic flourish, no raised voice, just truth. The judge turned to the defense. "Mr. Haskins." The young defense attorney adjusted his tie, clearly rattled. Yes, Your Honor. We maintain that Sergeant Mercer was following standard procedure and acted within protocol given the circumstances of the stop. There was no excessive force, no violence, no arrest." Linda interrupted smoothly. "No violence does not mean no harm." Judge Morales raised a hand. "Let's proceed in order. We'll begin with the plaintiff's submission of evidence." Linda clicked a small remote, and the courtroom screen lit up. The dashcam footage appeared sound intact. Everyone watched. Mercer's voice barked from the speakers. Logan's calm replies, the flashlight in the little girl's face, the hovering hand near the holster, and then Bella's voice. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Even the hum of the courthouse HVAC seemed to fade. Logan sat still, one hand gently covering Bella's. She squeezed back, but didn't look away. Mercer shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening as his own voice echoed through the speakers, condescending, impatient, abusive in tone, if not in touch. When the footage ended, Linda said nothing. She let the silence speak. Then from the back row, a voice rose. "Permission to approach, Your Honor." The judge glanced up. "Identify yourself. Matthew Reed, retired U.S. Marine Colonel. I'd like to testify as a character witness." Gasps rustled through the courtroom. Mercer's attorney stammered. "Objection, this was not pre-cleared." Judge Morales waved a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Haskins. The court will allow it." Reed took the stand, spine erect, voice gravelly with age, but rich with certainty. "Logan Miller," he began, "is not a man who seeks attention. He's not a man who runs from confrontation either. But what separates him is that he knows when not to fight." He glanced at the jury. He saved lives with silence, de-escalated war zones with words. And if you think he's here because he couldn't take a verbal insult, you've never known what it's like to be responsible for someone else's soul under fire. He paused, then added, "And you've certainly never tried to explain to a child why the people who are supposed to protect her made her afraid instead." Judge Morales looked over her glasses, voice steady. "Thank you, Colonel. That will be all." As Reed stepped down, he passed Mercer without a glance. Mercer looked down. He hadn't lost yet. But something in the room had shifted, not in Logan's favor. In truth's favor. And truth had a way of making men feel naked, especially those who had mistaken noise for strength. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the technician queued up the final exhibit. A small screen rolled down behind the witness stand. The judge gave a nod, and Linda Brooks stepped forward. We now present video evidence from Mr. Miller's personal recording captured during the incident. The audio and visual have been verified for authenticity. She clicked the remote. The screen flickered to life. It was shaky. At first, Logan's phone had been braced on the dashboard. The glare from the patrol car's spotlight flared across the lens, but as the figure of Sergeant Bryce Mercer stepped into view, the frame stabilized. The courtroom was silent. Mercer's voice crackled through the speakers. "You people come through here thinking you're invisible. You people." Logan's voice replied, calm. Veterans, drifters, janitors playing hero. There was a slight murmur from the crowd. Even the jurors flinched at the tone. Then came the part Linda had marked with precision. The moment Mercer stepped closer to the driver's side door, his hand hovering inches above his holstered weapon. Then came the voice that broke the room. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Bella's voice, small and fragile, drifted from the speaker like a songbird caught in a storm. The video paused on her wide eyes reflecting red and blue. Logan sat motionless, but his hand subtly moved over Bella's again on the table. Her fingers wrapped around his. The courtroom had heard war stories, heard legal jargon. But this was different. This was a child asking the world if she was safe, and hearing nothing in return. Linda stepped forward, her voice low. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the badge is not a weapon. It is a symbol, and when used properly, it brings peace. But when abused, even without a single bullet fired, it can leave a wound that lasts a lifetime." She turned toward Mercer. This child now looks at flashing lights and wonders if her father will come home. Mercer's attorney stood clearly rattled. "Objection, emotional manipulation." Judge Morales raised her hand. Overruled. "The jury will determine relevance." Linda let the video continue. This time it played past the ticket, past the scoff, to the moment Logan quietly said, "You're not scaring me, officer, but you're breaking something you won't see." Mercer leaned forward on the defense table, jaw tight. The playback hit him differently now, not just as memory, but as mirror. His voice, his posture, his disdain. It all rang louder in a room where he couldn't hide behind flashing lights. After the video ended, Linda nodded once and turned to the judge. "The plaintiff rests, Your Honor." Judge Morales turned to the defense. "Mr. Haskins." The young attorney stood stiffly. The defense calls no further witnesses." There was a stir. Even Mercer looked at him sideways. "No rebuttal?" Judge Morales asked. The lawyer swallowed. Respectfully. "Nothing we say would undo what's just been seen." Silence fell again. Then, unexpectedly, Judge Morales leaned forward. "Miss Bella Miller," she said softly. "Would you be comfortable speaking for a moment?" Logan turned to his daughter. "Only if you want to." Bella looked up at him, then at Linda, then nodded. She walked slowly to the front, her shoes tapping gently. Linda helped her into the witness chair, adjusting the mic. Judge Morales gave her a kind smile. "Hi, Bella." "Hi," she said shyly. "Do you remember what happened that night?" Bella nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Were you scared?" "Yes, but not because of my dad." The judge's brow lifted gently. "Why then?" Bella glanced at Mercer. "Because the policeman looked at my dad like he wasn't human, like he did something wrong just by being there." Linda didn't speak. Neither did Logan. No one needed to. Judge Morales asked, "And what did your dad do?" Bella thought for a moment. "He didn't yell. He didn't move fast. He just told me to stay buckled. And he kept his hands where the man could see." "And how did that make you feel?" Bella's eyes filled with something older than her years. "Like he was trying to protect me, even when he was the one being hurt." There it was. The courtroom didn't erupt. It didn't gasp. It breathed deeply, slowly, as if everyone had forgotten how oxygen worked until that moment. The judge nodded. "You may step down, Bella. You were very brave." Bella returned to her father, and he pulled her gently into his side. As court recessed for the day, Mercer moved stiffly toward the exit. But just before he reached the door, one of the veterans in the back row stood. A man with no medals, just a ball cap that read, "Vietnam 60 White." He looked Mercer in the eye and said, "You wore the badge. He wore the burden. Don't confuse the two." Mercer said nothing. Outside the courthouse steps were lined with quiet onlookers. Not protesters, not activists, just citizens. And as Logan and Bella walked down hand in hand, no one cheered. They simply stood aside and made way. Because something had shifted, and the badge had been reminded. When Matthew Reed took the witness stand, the air in the courtroom shifted, not from noise, but from gravity. He was tall, broad-shouldered despite age, with a silver crew cut and eyes like scorched steel. His left leg moved stiffly as he sat, and the faint glint of a military-issue knee brace peeked from beneath his slacks. Judge Morales gave him a nod. "Please state your name and background for the court." "Colonel Matthew James Reed, U.S. Marine Corps, retired. Served 34 years. Commanded the 2nd Reconnaissance Battalion during Operations Sand Viper. Echo Dusk and Resolute Path." And your relation to Mr. Logan Miller Reed glanced across the courtroom to where Logan sat beside Bella. "He served under my command for 3 deployments. Later, I served under his judgment." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Explain that last part, Colonel." Reed leaned forward, his voice steady low. "Because sometimes rank doesn't equal wisdom, and sometimes the man with the quietest voice in the room is the one holding everyone together." Linda Brooks stood. "Colonel Reed, can you describe an incident that reflects Mr. Miller's character in the field?" He gave a single nod. "Yes, ma'am. I recall an evening in northern Helmand. Intel had failed. We were boxed into a ravine with 30 hostiles surrounding us, high ground, nightfall, no comms. I had men freezing, panicking. I started calling for air support that wouldn't come." He paused. Logan didn't yell, didn't blame. He took one breath and said, "Sir, give me 15 minutes." Then he vanished into the dark alone. No rifle, just a map, a pen light, and the nerves of a ghost. A murmur stirred in the room. 13 minutes later, the enemy positions began to go dark, one by one. No bloodshed. He'd found the blind spot in the ridge, cut their supply line, and lit a signal that got our GPS working again. We got out without a single casualty. He looked to the jury. That man didn't fight to win. He fought to prevent a fight. Linda let the moment breathe. And after the war, Colonel Reed's voice dropped into something more personal. "I came home angry, confused. I drank too much, pushed my family away, couldn't sleep. You know who kept calling me Logan. Not once to lecture, just to listen. Every Tuesday at 700, for 2 years. He looked directly at Judge Morales. The world doesn't reward men like Logan Miller. It forgets them. But I can tell you this, he is the reason I'm sober. The reason my daughter still talks to me. The reason I didn't become another veteran lost in the static." There was silence. Then Reed added quietly, "And that badge," he glanced toward Mercer, "means nothing if the man behind it can't recognize honor standing in front of him." Mercer shifted in his seat, visibly sweating now. The defense attorney rose, voice hesitant. "Colonel Reed, with respect, that incident in Helmand was war. This is traffic enforcement. Isn't that comparing apples to no-son Reed cut in? It's comparing character. And Logan's hasn't changed, no matter the battlefield." Judge Morales gave a subtle nod. "Thank you, Colonel. You may step down." Reed stood slowly. As he passed the plaintiff's table, he rested a hand briefly on Logan's shoulder. "You've always fought the right fight, brother. Now let them see it." Court recessed for lunch, and the hallway buzzed with quiet intensity. Reporters whispered to each other, flipping pages in notepads. Members of the public who had come out of curiosity now stood as quiet witnesses, many wearing small military pins or veteran patches. Outside the courthouse, the wind had picked up. Bryce Mercer leaned against the side wall, cigarette trembling slightly between his fingers. He hadn't smoked in years. Now he was on his third since recess. He watched Logan step out into the sunlight, with Bella holding his hand. They didn't smile. They didn't gloat. They just walked, quiet, steady, grounded. Mercer flicked the cigarette away, jaw tightening. For the first time, he wasn't sure what he was defending anymore. His badge, his ego, or the version of himself he'd built to avoid ever having to say he was wrong. Back inside, Linda joined Logan on the bench outside the courtroom. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. Reed didn't have to come. "He knew he did," she said. "Men like that don't forget who walked them out of hell." Logan looked down at Bella, who was sketching something on her notepad with total focus. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "A scale," she replied. "Like the justice one, but yours is heavier on the good side." Logan chuckled softly. Linda smiled. "Smart kid. She sees more than people give her credit for. So does her father." As court reconvened, Judge Morales addressed the room. "I have reviewed the testimony thus far and all submitted exhibits. We will proceed to final statements tomorrow. At that time, I will determine whether this case warrants disciplinary referral to the Attorney General's office." The word sent a hush across the room. Logan sat still, but Mercer's hands clenched. This was no longer just about a traffic stop. It was about judgment, about the lines between power and humility, voice and silence, pride and truth. And in that room, the quietest man continued to speak the loudest. Sergeant Bryce Mercer stared at his reflection in the stainless steel mirror above the courthouse bathroom sink. His tie was perfect, his shirt freshly pressed, his posture still screamed authority. But something was wrong. It wasn't the look in his eyes, it was the lack of it. He didn't look like the man who once barked orders at rookies, or the one who was called to speak at high school career days. He looked like a man trying to remember why he started wearing the badge in the first place. Mercer splashed cold water on his face. He braced both hands on the counter, head hanging low. The sting of Colonel Reed's words echoed like a hammer on hollow metal. That badge means nothing if the man behind it can't recognize honor standing in front of him. The words hadn't come from an activist, a lawyer, or even Logan Miller. They had come from a fellow Marine, a man who had every right to hate the system, and yet used his voice not to destroy, but to clarify. Mercer had spent the past decade building armor not out of Kevlar, but out of detachment. Procedures, policies, departmental lingo. He had trained himself to see threats, not people, to control, not connect. But now that armor was cracking. And the worst part, no one had even laid a hand on him. Meanwhile, Logan sat on a quiet bench outside the courthouse cafeteria, Bella resting her head against his arm. She had fallen asleep without warning, a half-eaten granola bar still in her hand. Her sketchbook lay on her lap, open to a new drawing, a pair of boots, one large, one small, side by side beneath a rising sun. Linda sat across from him sipping tea. "She's the kind of quiet that speaks volumes," she said. "She gets that from her mom." Logan replied, his voice soft. Linda tilted her head. "You never talked about her." Logan looked down. "She passed when Bella was 5. Leukemia. Quick and cruel. I'm sorry." He nodded. "Bella doesn't remember much, but she remembers the way I held her afterward. Said I didn't cry, but I didn't let go either. I think..." That shaped her more than I'll ever know. Linda leaned forward. You've protected her from so much, Logan. But sometimes letting her see you fight back is just as protective. Logan exhaled deeply. You think I've done the right thing. I think you've done the rare thing. He looked at Bella, then out the window toward the flag that rippled gently in the courtyard breeze. People think strength is about action, he said. But sometimes it's about restraint. And sometimes it's about choosing the right moment to let go of silence. Back in his squad car, Mercer sat in the driver's seat with the windows rolled up, engine off radio. Silent. The courthouse parking lot was nearly empty, yet he still felt like eyes were on him. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out an old leather wallet. Hidden deep in the back was a folded photo creased at the corners, colors fading. It was him, 10 years younger, standing beside his academy mentor, Officer Glenn Mallory. Both in uniform, both smiling. Mallory had died in the line of duty shot during a domestic call. Bryce remembered what Mallory used to say after every shift. Son, if your badge gives you power, you're already unqualified. But if it gives you responsibility, then you might be worthy. He had forgotten those words. He had forgotten why he'd joined. For years he had told himself that keeping the streets safe meant making fast calls, never hesitating, always staying on top. But Logan Miller had made him hesitate, and Bella Miller had made him reflect. What kind of man makes a child ask, "Are we in trouble just because her father wears old boots and a tired jacket?" What kind of officer doesn't stop to ask why a man keeps his hand still, even when wrongly accused? His chest tightened. The kind of guilt that doesn't come with flashing lights or sirens, but with stillness. Mercer pulled out his phone. He scrolled to the number for the department's internal affairs liaison. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then slowly he lowered the phone and set it down. Not yet. But soon. That evening back at the cabin, Logan tucked Bella into bed. She blinked up at him sleepily. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart. Was I brave today?" He smiled. "You were a lighthouse. What's that mean?" "It means you didn't shout. You didn't try to fight the storm. You just stood still and shined." Bella's eyes drifted closed with a soft smile. Logan sat there long after her breathing settled. He stared at the ceiling in the dark, thinking not about courtrooms or verdicts, but about the boy he used to be. The one who thought silence meant strength, and the man he was becoming. The one who knew silence, when used right, could rebuild things far more powerful than words ever could. The morning of the verdict, the courthouse didn't buzz, it breathed. No cameras, no protests, no chants, just people. Veterans, parents, teachers, a few quiet strangers who had heard the story and come not to witness drama, but to witness justice. Logan arrived with Bella beside him, her hand firmly in his, her face calm but focused. She wore the same pale blue dress this time with a little white cardigan. Her ribbon matched his shirt, a silent show of unity. Linda Brooks met them at the courthouse steps. "Are you ready?" she asked. Logan looked down at Bella, then back at Linda. "No," he said honestly. "But we came anyway." Inside the courtroom was already half full. Sergeant Bryce Mercer sat at the defense table, his posture rigid, but his eyes less defiant. He no longer wore his full-dress blues. Today he wore a plain gray suit. A badgeless man. The judge entered promptly at 9:00 a.m. Her gavel struck once. Court is now in session. All rise. Everyone stood. All parties have presented closing arguments. The jury has reached a verdict. The court now reconvenes to deliver judgment in Miller versus Mercer. Judge Morales adjusted her glasses, her voice steady as stone. This case at its heart was not about violence. It was not about bruises, bullets, or broken bones. It was about abuse of discretion, the misuse of power in the presence of innocence. She looked from Mercer to Logan, then to the jury. I reviewed the testimonies. I reviewed the evidence. And most importantly, I reviewed the silence between the words. Because often that is where the truth lives. She picked up a folded paper. The court finds that Sergeant Bryce Mercer violated the civil rights of Mr. Logan Miller through unlawful detainment, demonstrated a pattern of discriminatory behavior against veterans, and caused psychological distress to a minor child present at the scene. A murmur swept through the gallery. Mercer's face turned pale. The court orders the following: Sergeant Mercer is to issue a formal public apology to Mr. Miller and his daughter, to be recorded and archived with the county civil registry. He is to be placed under administrative review and removed from patrol duty indefinitely. His personnel record will permanently reflect this disciplinary action. Logan didn't move. He didn't blink, but his hand closed gently over Bella's. Judge Morales continued. To Mr. Miller, this court acknowledges not only the injustice you faced, but the dignity with which you responded. You asked for no money. You sought no headlines. You simply asked for accountability, not just for yourself, but for your daughter. She looked at Bella. Young lady, your words did not just move this courtroom. They reminded us what justice is meant to protect. Bella smiled just a little. Then came the silence. The judge looked at Mercer. This court invites you, Sergeant Mercer, to take the stand. Mercer hesitated. His attorney leaned over and whispered, "You don't have to." But Mercer shook his head. Slowly he rose. The courtroom was dead quiet as he walked toward the witness stand, not as a defendant, not as a cop, but as a man. He took the mic. "I spent most of my career thinking I knew what it meant to serve," he began, his voice hoarse. "I believed wearing a badge meant being right, that every stop was justified, that my authority was unshakable." He glanced at Logan, then Bella. "But I was wrong." He swallowed hard. I looked at Logan Miller and saw a man out of place. What I should have seen was a man who had already done more for this country than I ever had, and I treated him like he didn't belong. His eyes met Bella's. "I made you afraid of something that should have made you feel safe. For that I am deeply sorry." There were no cheers, no applause, just a long pause. Then Judge Morales spoke. Apology noted. Let the record reflect that it was delivered voluntarily. After court adjourned, Logan stood on the courthouse steps, Bella perched beside him, holding his hand like always. A reporter approached. "Mr. Miller, just one question." "Why didn't you sue for damages?" Logan looked at her evenly. "Because my daughter didn't need a check. She needed a truth to believe in." Linda stood a few steps away, arms crossed, smiling. "She got it," she whispered to herself. Colonel Reed appeared quietly from the back of the crowd. He didn't say anything, just offered Logan a nod, the kind only soldiers understand. Mercer exited minutes later, walking alone. No one stopped him. No one jeered. Because sometimes consequences don't need volume. They just need weight. That night, back at the cabin, Logan tucked Bella into bed. She turned to him with sleepy eyes. "Daddy." Was that the end? Logan thought for a moment. "No," he said. "It was the beginning of something better." She smiled, turned over, and drifted off. Logan sat in the quiet for a while, watching the stars outside. For the first time in years, the silence around him didn't feel like retreat. It felt like peace. The voicemail icon blinked on Logan's old flip phone. 5 messages, all from reporters. He deleted them one by one without listening. No interviews, no sound bites, no studio lights. He hadn't walked into that courtroom for fame. He walked in because silence this time would have been surrender. And Logan Miller had never surrendered, not on a battlefield, not in a hospital waiting room, and certainly not when his daughter's trust in the world was on the line. Outside the cabin, morning light slid through the trees, like it had been waiting its turn all night. The wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth. A red cardinal landed on the porch rail, chirped twice, and flew off. Logan sat on the steps with a cup of coffee, and Bella curled up beside him, wrapped in her favorite fleece blanket. "Do people know what happened?" she asked, watching the woods. "Some," he said, "and some don't need to." Bella nodded thoughtfully. "Miss Carter told the class I was brave." "You were." She said it was the kind of bravery that doesn't need to yell. Logan smiled. "That's the best kind." She took a long sip from her cocoa mug. "Did the man say sorry because the judge told him to?" Logan looked down at his daughter's face, earnest, alert, older than her years. "No," he said. He said sorry because he finally listened. Bella thought for a moment. "Will he be better?" "Now, I don't know," Logan answered honestly. "But maybe he'll try." And sometimes trying was the beginning of change. Later that afternoon, Logan visited the local grocery store, just a regular trip, just a regular man. But something was different. The cashier, a young woman with a nose ring and a college hoodie, looked up and blinked twice. Her hands trembled slightly as she rang up the items. "You're Logan, right?" He nodded gently. She didn't gush, didn't take a photo, just said, "My dad's a vet. He hasn't been to court since 1999. But he drove 3 hours to watch you speak." Logan didn't know what to say. She bagged the last item, handed him the receipt, then added in a softer voice. He said, "Watching you made him remember why he put on the uniform in the first place." Logan gave her a small nod, then left with his paper bags and a quiet heart. The change was happening, but not loudly. By the end of the week, an anonymous letter arrived in Logan's mailbox. Typed. No signature. "Mr. Miller, you don't know me, but I watched your trial. I was a rookie in the force back in 2004. I left 5 years later, burnt out and bitter. But watching you walk into that courtroom with your daughter changed something in me. You reminded me of what the badge was supposed to mean. Thank you. Not for the lawsuit, not for the speech, but for standing still when most people would have walked away. We see you. We hear you. And some of us are learning again. One of the quiet ones." Logan folded the letter and slid it into a box, where he kept a few things that still mattered. Bella's hospital bracelet, a photo of his late wife smiling at the Grand Canyon, and a crumpled list of veterans he still called once a month. He didn't reply to the letter, but he carried its weight like a warm coat in the cold. The ripple effect continued. At a local VFW hall, someone printed out the transcript of Colonel Reed's testimony and pinned it to the bulletin board. A note was scribbled underneath in red ink. "Not all heroes wear uniforms. Some just refuse to stay silent." At a church service 2 towns over, the sermon closed with Bella's quote, "He was trying to protect me, even when he was the one being hurt." And in a sheriff's department across the state line, a new recruit training program added a module titled Silent Strength, the Logan Miller Standard. But Logan knew none of that, because he didn't track ripples. He just made sure he didn't stop throwing stones where truth was needed. That weekend, as the sun dipped low and the woods turned golden, Logan stood behind Bella as she lined up her stance at the edge of the field. Her tiny hands clutched a child-sized recurve bow. He adjusted her shoulder gently. "Now breathe," he said. She inhaled slowly. "Focus on the target, not the wind, not the world, just the space between you and truth." She released. The arrow thudded into the hay bale just left of center. Her eyes lit up. Logan smiled. Closer. She turned to him. "Can we try again as many times as it takes?" The wind rustled through the tall grass. Somewhere behind them a bluebird sang. And somewhere beyond that, a world still busy and broken began quietly, invisibly to mend itself, one silent act of courage at a time. The sky blushed in hues of amber, and rose as dusk settled gently over the hills behind Logan's cabin. A soft breeze carried the scent of pine needles and warm earth, wrapping the world in a quiet that didn't feel empty, but earned. On the slope behind the cabin, a homemade archery target stood at the far end of a grassy clearing. Straw-stuffed hay bales, stacked in a neat triangle, a red circle painted in the center, slightly smudged from repeated hits. Bella stood with her feet shoulder-width apart, a child-sized bow steady in her small hands. Logan knelt beside her, adjusting her elbow, his voice soft. "Steady. Breathe through your nose. Focus on where you want it to go." Bella pulled the string back, her eyes squinting slightly. She released. The arrow sailed clean and true, landing just outside the center ring. She turned to him, frowning. "Still off." Logan smiled. "You were closer than last time. But not perfect. Nothing worth learning ever is," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. They sat down together on the wooden bench facing the field. The last light of day painted everything in gold, even the calluses on Logan's hands. Bella pulled her knees to her chest, resting her chin on them. "Daddy, are you glad it happened? The court stuff?" Logan stared straight ahead for a long time before answering. "No," he said. "I'm not glad it happened, but I'm glad we faced it." Bella was quiet for a moment. "Then I don't think that man was a monster." Logan looked over at her. She wasn't being naive. She wasn't excusing what Mercer did. She was trying to understand it. "That's the part most people miss," Logan said. "Monsters are rare. But fear, pride, and power, those are everywhere. And if a man doesn't know how to carry those things, he starts crushing everything underfoot, even the people trying to help him." Bella thought for a moment. "But you didn't crush back." "No," Logan said. "I didn't." "Why not?" He looked at her. Really looked, because this was the moment he had carried through war, through grief, through court. The moment when his daughter didn't just learn what happened, but why it mattered. Because strength isn't about who can shout the loudest, Bella. It's not about who wins the fight. Real strength, he said, is knowing when not to swing. Knowing when to let the truth do the work. And trusting that even when the world feels broken, it's worth trying to fix it. Bella leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat there until the sun dipped fully behind the trees and 1,000 stars blinked awake above them. The night wrapped around them like an old friend. Later, after Bella fell asleep, Logan stepped out onto the porch. He looked up at the stars and exhaled, deep, grounded. The phone on the table buzzed once, a text from Linda Brooks. "Media's still asking for a statement. Want me to handle it?" Logan typed back, "Tell them this. A badge can give you authority, but only love, honor, and truth can give you the right to be heard." He paused, then added, "And sometimes the quietest voice in the room carries the biggest lesson." He hit send, then turned off the phone. Not because the story was over, but because it had finally landed where it was meant to, in the hearts of those willing to listen. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let us know. It's always a gift to see how far these stories travel. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or made you think, please consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story. Every week we share powerful true-to-life stories that remind us all of the quiet strength in kindness, honor, and love. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Your presence here means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and stay human.